Hey everybody, I am going to be talking about doing conditionals today. Um, Conditionals are really helpful on being able to have different paths of code happening when you are writing inside of Maya. If you don't want the same thing exactly to happen every time you run the script, if you want something to vary in what you're doing, if statements can actually help quite a bit. So, how do you do that? You do that with if statements. So I'm going to be using this script editor here, Notepad++, because we'll be working with some loops, and I want, if I get stuck into an infinite loop, that I can save the code over here. I've saved it as a .py file that will allow us to create Python files. So I'm going to look at an if statement. If true, this is going to be the most basic one. It's always going to be true, but it lets us get the syntax down to see what is happening. Print this statement is true. So let's copy this and paste it in there. Run it, and when we run it, let's clear the history really quick. Edit, clear history. There we go. Run this, and you can see it prints, or it runs the code, and then it prints the statement. This statement is true. That is great now. Now let's expand on this code a little bit, and let's create a variable. We'll say var is equal to true. And we'll say if var, which is the variable we just created, print this statement is true. So in theory, this should be exactly the same as what we put over here, but we're just using a variable. And you can see that it does print out that statement. So let's clear the history and run this again. There you go. So we can see that if var, so if true, then print the statement. What about if we change that variable to false? What will happen? Let me know in the comments of the chat. What do you think will happen? And 3, 2, 1, we are going to run this now. Boom. So it runs the command, but it does not print anything. And that's because it found that the statement was false and it doesn't print anything. So if there is a condition where it might be true or false, or you might have a condition that might be true or something else, we can actually do something called an if statement. And I'll actually add it over here so that we keep everything consistent. So we have an else statement. So we can say else, and what do we want to do with the else? Let's say print this statement is false. So let's check the statement now. So we can see now with the variable being false, it prints the statement is false. And let's change this to true. And when we print that statement, it equals true. So perfect. It's doing exactly what we expect it to do. That is a very simple example of an if statement. But we can expand on this and make it work within Maya. So we can do, let's import Maya commands. import maya.cmds as MC. And then we can say mc.poly. Actually, let's do this inside of the Notepad++. Again, just trying to stay consistent with where I'm writing the code. Import maya.cmds as MC. And then here I'm going to, if it is true, .poly sphere. And if it is false, we will create mc.poly cube. So let's copy that and we'll paste it in here. There we go. So it's false right now and it created a cube. If we change this to true, it creates a sphere. So this is a pretty awesome little tool. We have to change it in the code here later on when we do more GUI stuff or graphical user interfaces, basically making a window. We can actually make kind of like a checkbox or something like that, and that will run that. But let's do something a little bit more practical, and we'll do a loop, and then we'll kind of create a row of objects. So I'm going to get rid of this code right here, and I'm going to do a while loop. While I'm going to say create a couple variables while num of cubes, we'll work with cubes today, is equal to 10. So we'll create 10 cubes, and then cubes is equal to 0 to start off with. So while cubes is less than number of cubes that we want to create, what do we want to do? We are going to create a cube. So we'll say mc.poly cube. And now that we have that poly cube created, we are going to make sure that we increment the cubes. Equals cube plus 1. Or cubes, sorry. There we go. I'm going to make it all S's. There we go. So while cubes is equal or less than number of cubes, num of cubes, while cubes is less than number of cubes, run polycubes, which is going to just create a cube. And then we're just keeping track with our variable that we've created a cube. So we're going to say cubes equals whatever the current number of cubes is plus 1 because we just created another one. So when we start off, it's going to be 0. We create a cube, then we say 0 plus 1. So let's copy all this code, paste and run it here, and we can see here it goes 1 through 10. Creates 10 cubes for us. They're all stacked up on top of each other. So let's give a variable of x. So this is going to be our x coordinate. X is equal to 0 to start off with. And let's set a name. Oops. Let's do this inside of Notepad++. x equals 0. And here we'll set the name of the cube. So, cube name is equal to the string cube plus the string of cubes. So that way it's going to start off 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And then we'll say this is name is equal to cube name. There you go. And then we want to be able to change the attribute. So set adder, actually, I think it's with a capital A. Set adder is equal to, we're going to say cube name. So we're going to call the name of the object plus translate x, because that's the attribute that we want to change. Translate x. And we're going to say that is equal to x times 5. So basically it's going to move it 5 sections over. Oh, line 9 is giving us an error. What does it say? Oh, okay. So what I am messing up here is that when we're calling the attribute name, we do need to add a dot. So let's do that. There we go. Created them. Right now, x is staying the same. So we need to modify that. But it created all of the cubes. Right now, it's basically x equals 0. So when we multiply it by 5, it's going to stay at 0. So here, let's say x equals x plus 1. That's simple enough, right? Let me do it inside of this code over here. Sorry. And we'll copy and paste it. X equals x plus 1. Let's get rid of all these cubes. And try this again. Now when we run it, we can see it's lining up 10 cubes next to each other like this. So now we're going to start incorporating the if statement, because we want to increment a y value, so y equals 0. So that way we can have multiple rows coming down. So that it's not all laid out in a straight line, we're going to basically make a rectangle or a matrix of cubes when we do this. So what I am going to do is open that Notepad++, and we're going to say, let's copy this here. And this is going to be the attribute of translate y. And instead of x times 5, we'll say y times 5. And we need the variable y here. Y equals 0. There we go. So we're going to use the if statement here. And in the if statement, what I'm going to do is say if x, let's say, is greater than 5, we are going to do y equals y plus 1. And we'll see how this one goes, but it's not where we're going to end it. You'll see why right now. It's not going to do exactly what we want, but it's kind of the next step. So we'll run that there, and we can see that it is creating a stepping up kind of ladder type thing. What we actually want to do is make it kind of start a new row where we have 5 on one row and 5 on the other. We can go up or down. If we wanted to go down instead of plus, we would do minus. Okay, so let's go over here, and now what I'm going to do is say x equals 0. So what that is going to do is reset the x values, so that way when we start off a new row of x's, it's going to start off over here at the beginning. So let's copy this code here. And we're still going to need to make a few more changes, but here now you can see that it updates it. That is great. With the second time around, you can see that it doesn't create it exactly at 0, so we'll see if we can make some adjustments to get that working properly, but it is kind of getting closer. So both of these values are set after we check this command. So let's make it after, or sorry, before. So we're going to put it after now. Let's clear out all these cubes really quick. And we'll copy all this code. Paste it inside of the script editor here. And by making that change, by having the if statement before we change the attributes, it did line it up correctly. Here we can see that we have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So we want this to actually be on the previous row. So what we can do, instead of less than 5, we can say less than or equal to 5. And I believe that will change the code to be what we want it. There we go. We have 2 rows of 5. So that makes it pretty useful so that we can keep on incrementing this over and over again. So we need an equal sign there. And the cool thing is that it will work for however many times you want to do this. So let's say we had 100 cubes. Paste this here, make sure that, yep, we have 100 cubes here. We'll go through and it will create that grid of 100 cubes. If we wanted it to be wider, for example, so instead of 5 per row, we can actually change this to be 10 instead of 5. And you'll see that if we run this code now, they're going to have wider rows and have less columns going up to accommodate the whole 5, because this loop here every time kind of resets itself because of this if statement in order to make that appropriate, or that selection the way we are anticipating it to be. So that is kind of a basic use of an if statement. We do have other types of things like else if and else statements that we're not using in this one, but this is just a simple example of a conditional used within Maya's structure or within Maya commands to be able to generate a kind of grid of objects. So hopefully you guys find this helpful to understand the basics of a conditional statement. and we'll see you guys in the next video. Have a good one.